all these organs that are in the abdomen are getting their sympathetics from higher levels in general. And so if these somatic sensory, visceral sensories are having to go back with the sympathetic system, they're going to end up somewhere higher than the organs themselves happen to be. Right? Because it's only when they get back to the spinal cord, they're not going to do it in the lower lumbar and sacral regions. They're going to send these visceral sensory much higher levels. So you'll see. Okay, so visceral sensory is following sympathetics, right? So here's the visceral sensory in the abdomen and pelvis. Okay, remember it's following sympathetics. It's coming back up with these sympathetics. It's going to go into this paravertebral ganglia, but it's not going to synapse there. It doesn't need to, right? It's going to come all the way through, and then it's going to come back up here because its cell body is in the same place as other sensory cell bodies. And then it's going to go back up, and it's going to synapse in the central nervous system in this dorsal horn. Okay? And it's going to be synapsing pretty much right where the non-visceral sensory, where the other somatic sensories. So you're going to get all this screwy referred pain problem, right? Because visceral stuff is going to essentially the same place that the somatic stuff is going, and so visceral pain, you get confused with somatic pain. Okay, so same story, right? You got preganglionic sympathetics coming out of the central nervous system. Preganglionic sympathetics are going into the ganglia. In the case of the abdomen, they're going into these ganglia around the major arteries, and their postganglionics are going to bits of gut. Okay? Visceral sensory from these same bits of gut or organs or whatever are going to follow these sympathetics back, and they don't really care whether they're following postganglionics or preganglionics. They're just following sympathetics back until they get to the spinal cord. Okay, so visceral sensory from abdomen and pelvis. It's like somatic sensory and somatic motor in that it is a single neuron system. It's not like visceral motor, which has to have a synapse along the way. As in the thorax, the visceral sensory axon follows the reverse path of the sympathetic system. Fair enough. There's something funny going on down in the pelvis, where some of them seem to be following parasympathetics, but we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so here's the pelvic story from the uterus. The sympathetics are coming back, and they're not following the visceral sensory are not following sympathetics, but they're following these pelvic splanchnic nerves, which, as you recall, are sort of look like sympathetic preganglionics, and they're going back into the dorsal horn of the sacral vertebrae. Okay, so in the dorsal horn, and remember, there are two layers of cell bodies, right? You got in the dorsal horn, you've got these somatic sensories here, and then these visceral sensories that are all coming away, and they get confused. So when you're having a heart attack, you say, oh, something's burning on the inside of my left arm. No, it has nothing to do with your left arm, but the somatic sensory from your left arm skin is going to the same place that the visceral sensory from the left part of your heart's going, and you can't tell which one it is. The result is, in some cases more than others, the referred pain of abdominal organs can be in rather crazy places. So if your stomach is feeling visceral pain, well, part of it you might feel roughly where your stomach is, and another part you might feel in the middle of your back, which has nothing else, which is not where your stomach is, but it's being referred because of confusion of, gee, where's that sensation coming from? It must be somatic. It must be somatic from my back. because that's, that's where my somatic sensation is. The really bizarre one and interesting one, which we're going to talk about, is gallbladder and liver, which you can use this to test your understanding of what's really going on here. So, let's take a look. Okay, so sympathetics to the gallbladder, which are right here. Remember, they're coming from, they're coming with the greater splanchnic nerve. All right, the preganglionics are coming down here, going to these ganglia around the celiac trunk, following the common hepatic artery, and then the hepatic proper, and then the right hepatic, and going to the gallbladder. So that visceral sensory from the gallbladder is going to travel with this sympathetic back here, travel with this sympathetic back here, travel with the sympathetic back here, and when it gets back to the spinal cord, the central nervous system says, oh my, there's something, I feel some pain, and it seems to be somewhere around my middle thoracic region on the body wall. Okay, so where are we going to feel this? So it's part of the celiac trunk. So sympathetic postganglionics come from celiac ganglion. The celiac ganglion preganglionics come from the greater splanchnic. Okay, so if it confuses, it says, okay, we're getting something from T5 and T9. Well, this dumb old dorsal horn doesn't know visceral from somatic sensory, so it says, it must be stuff coming from ribs 5 through 9 on my back, or the stuff that's come around just above my belly button, because that's where the somatic sensory is. And when I feel something zipping around in that dorsal horn from that area, it's got to be somatic sensory, so it thinks it feels pain coming around there. However, the gallbladder is particularly interesting because there's another problem here. You remember when you opened up your abdomen, there was your gallbladder poking out under the liver in many cases, and this whole area was green, right? So your diaphragm was sort of lying over the top of this, and if your gallbladder is distended or oozing stuff, it may be right next to the diaphragm, and the somatic sensory from the diaphragm may think that you've got a diaphragm problem, not a gallbladder or liver problem. So your diaphragm, they're going to say, oh my God, she's got a pain in the diaphragm. What am I going to do? Well, the somatic sensory stuff on the diaphragm, where's that coming from? Remember where diaphragm innervation comes from? Phrenic nerve, which is?
C3 through C5.
C3, 4, 5 keeps the diaphragm alive. So you're suddenly getting somatic sensory in C3, 4, 5, not coming from C3, 4, 5, coming from the diaphragm, but that's where those nerves are dragged down. So you suddenly, your body says, God, that's a pain in the neck. What's going on in the back of the neck? There must be a bee biting me somewhere on the back of my neck and my shoulder, because that's where C3, 4, 5 is. So that stuff from the diaphragm is going to go up, but it's even worse than that, because you saw your gallbladder sort of poking out here, your diaphragm's coming down like that, but then you also have the parietal peritoneum, which also picks up sensory innervation from the body wall. So you feel something in the parietal peritoneum, well, that's the body wall coming down like that. So it can confuse somatic sensory on that body wall overlying the gallbladder. So poor old, a gallbladder illness or a liver illness, because these are huge things, can go to lots and lots of different places, which may or may not have anything to do with where the liver happens to be in the gallbladder. So you can pick up these sensory things here, okay, these levels, these thoracic levels, because remember that your gallbladder and liver are lying right under these costal cartilages here, so these body wall innervations are innervating the parietal peritoneum there, and they can pick up stuff and transmit it back and say, gee, there's something wrong with the skin in your stomach or overlying your anterior abdominal wall. So they're going to pick up stuff around it here. So the result is that gallbladder and liver problems, some of them are going to be picked up back here. Okay? Some of them are going to be picked up here because of the phrenic nerve, and some of them are going to be picked up over here because of the innervation of the body wall and parietal peritoneum. None of which gives you a particularly good idea where your gallbladder happens. Well, this one's pretty where your gallbladder happens to be because that's picking up somatic on the outside. But realize that referred plane in abdominal organs is sort of problematic because, first of all, most of it's got to go to thoracic levels and upper lumbar because that's where you're preganglionic sympathetics. But then there's this peritoneum overlying it and other structures which may be affected. And like I say, so stomach can be felt in the middle of the back, liver can be felt down here. Referred pain to abdominal organs is a real test if you can figure out different ways in which nerves get to that part of the body. Okay, this has gone a long way, but trust me, you'll be asked to come up with some of this information real soon. Yes?
So if there's some parasympathetics from S3 and S4, what ganglia does it go to?
They go to these things called they're called hypogastric ganglia, the little ganglia in the back of the pelvis.
Wasn't that what you
They're doing stuff way down in there, which again, pelvis is out of our realm.
And plus he talks slow, which I like.
You have to well, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but know that they're not going to celiac and